Buck, thanks for joining us today. We do appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
First of all, let's talk about the legislative working groups that have been working diligently over the past couple of months, looking at the state budget, the essential state agencies. Where do we stand with the working groups and the work that it has been be able to produce here?
Well, we finished our hearings, and we had all of the major agencies come before us, and we had them come in 3 or 4 different sessions. And we looked at salaries, we looked at their travel, we looked at their commodity purchases, and their contractual. And we were able to drill down a whole lot deeper than we usually are able to in our budget hearings.
What was the purpose of these working groups?
Well, we're looking for cost savings. We're in a tight budget time, just like we were last year. And we're just, you always hear of there's fat in government, and we believe we found a good bit.
Where did you find it?
I think if you asked most of the legislators, we travel to begin with. The Lieutenant Governor likes to point out that we found $62 million in out-of-state travel that our agencies are taking now. And some of them even have expanded that in the last 2 or 3 years. So when we're in a tight budget year, when you see state employees, and a lot of these trips are valuable, they learn something, but when they're going to resorts out of state, when the taxpayers see this, it just gives you a lot of heartburn.
Is that the only area that you see where there can be some savings? Other than travel, what is there?
Well, in contractual, we looked at a lot of contractual services where they spend their money. We looked at different ways maybe agencies could join together and do some contractual buying with maybe a major supplier and save money. But every time you start talking about that, you may be discussing a local merchant being able to sell to an agency versus one single selling company. And so, those questions came up a lot, that would we be taking business away from a local supplier if you're going to give one contract to a large company that he can't compete when the state would save money. Overall, the state would save money, but you may be taking the business away from a small supplier who that's his major, I guess, customer. And so, that causes you to stop and think about what we're trying to do here.
Why are we in this situation? It seems like that we were just talking about having a tight state budget a year ago.
Yeah.
Is it because the revenue projections, not only for the next year but the years to come, are low, or does this have anything to do with the tax structure or the new tax structure with cutting taxes?
Well, it really, the new tax cuts that everyone talks about have not even kicked in. They don't kick in for another year or two. The major one being the corporate franchise tax, which is, I think, a couple $100 million, and that's going to be a 10-year phase in, but that doesn't even start for, I think, a year after next. What we're really seeing is Mississippi right now. We had our economists talk to us this morning, and we're looking at about 1.5 to 1.8% growth in revenues, and that's about what the Mississippi economy is growing at. Now, I just looked this afternoon, we were trying to compare some of those numbers to how Mississippi stacks up nationally. Well, inflation nationwide is running about 1.5%. I saw in the Wall Street Journal where the national economy is growing at about a 2% rate. And they blame a lot of that, of course, on Obamacare with the expenses. Of course, you have inflation in health care, but that's not even offsetting other things. Mississippi has always lagged behind the nation, but it seems like, unfortunately, we're right there. If the nation's growing 2% and we're growing about 1.8%, we're right there with the rest of the country. There's just not this, we've always said 3% growth in government is knocking it out of the park. Now, when you say 2%, 1.5%, what does that really mean? Well, right now, we have the agencies have come to us with their requests. We're at the beginning of the budget process for next year. They're requesting a 10% increase. If you added everyone's request, that is 10% more than we're spending right now, which translates to $670 million is how much more they're asking for. Now, this includes, obviously, education, K through 12 education, the MAEP formula, which we're studying right now, possibly making some changes. That request is about $180 million. I know Medicaid. Medicaid is something that's a budget that's based on the medical services provided to those who qualify for Medicaid. It's something you can't project. You do your best, and the Medicaid department does a great job now projecting, but still, they need $100 million more than they're getting this past year. We have our Institutes of Higher Learning requesting 30, 40 million. Our community colleges, we have what we call mid-level funding. That's a statute in the books that's very similar to MAEP, that if you were to fully fund that, that would be $70 million. So it just goes on and on and on, the requests. Now, some of the requests are not necessarily for extra programs, but they're for just increased expenses. People want to give their staff pay raises, which in our budget working groups, one of the phases we looked at was salaries. We looked at the staffing needs of an agency. We looked at what pay raises the employees have been getting already for the past 2 or 3 years. And we're looking in this request, they're asking for even more. So anyway, that's really where we look. We're looking at a 1.8% increase in revenue, and they're requesting 10% increase in overall spending.
There was some talk last session about consolidating state agencies.
Yep.
Is that still on the table?
We'll look at that again. Yeah, we filed 2 different bills that would have consolidated 2 different groups of agencies. One, we called it the ag consolidation. It was forestry, soil and water with the Department of Agriculture. And then the other we looked at was consolidating some of our health agencies, which was mainly Medicaid and Department of Rehabilitation and some of the others. I can't remember what all. And we were looking, again, it was cost savings, and it would, we saw anywhere from 10 to 20 million that could have been saved. You would have been cutting people, because that's, if you're talking about consolidating back office operations, that's where your savings would have come from. If you could provide those services with fewer people. That's what we were looking to do. Now, I can't say for sure if those bills will be filed again, but with our budget working groups, with the work they've done, and the savings that we hope we can pull out of there will be similar to what we thought we were going to save with consolidation bills.
Do you think that the work that has been done over the past couple of months has come to a point where we can say that we've done a good job trying to wring out the washcloth and try to get as much savings as we can out of state government?
I really do. State government is the people's business. We should be exposing it all. The people have the right to look at the whole checkbook. For instance, we were looking at some purchasing the other day, and I can't remember which agency it was, but they have a purchasing card, and the printout they provided us had a list of every charge made on the card and did not say who the vendor was. And the senator I was sitting by, he showed that to me, and I said, ask him who the vendors are. And it was Senator Wiggins. Senator Wiggins asked, well, this doesn't have any vendors. Who are you paying this to? And they admitted, well, it's not in the computer system. We just kind of write that down by hand on another piece of paper, on another log book. I was like, do what? What do you mean you do? Yeah, we're trying to fix that. So little things like that, just those practices, and they admitted that this is antiquated, we shouldn't be doing it like this. We're in the middle of trying to fix that. That's why you have a computer program and you can write checks with a computer, that you'd enter that data, but they weren't doing it. And so anyway, little things like that do get exposed, and not to saying there's any wasted money, but we as legislators and as the taxpayers couldn't even tell what things were being spent on.
You described the state agencies requesting 10% more than they normally do. Mm-hmm. You're saying that the person that is forecasting the state revenues that are coming in, the growth is between 1 and 1.8%.
Right.
Do you anticipate another round of state budget cuts, or will those cuts be specifically targeted to those state agencies where you're finding the most amount of savings?
Now, well, let me ask you on the savings. As a result of the working groups, we're still looking at the data that we picked up from the meetings, still hashing out this agency spending this and this agency spending that. I anticipate when we get to the legislative session, we will take each of those seriously as we look at those individual budgets. Now you mentioned, do I anticipate any further cuts? We've already had one cut the governor made, approximately $57 million, that was done early in this fiscal year 2017. And it amounted to less than 1% across the board, except holding MAEP harmless. I know it held education harmless, and there was a small cut to everyone else. He really didn't hear anything from the agencies. It was early in the year, less than 1%. They could absorb that easily. Maybe they cut their travel, I don't know, cut some of their supply purchases. Right now, again, with the economists, and really it's the Revenue Estimating Committee, which is the treasurer and the LBO officer and the economist. I don't see us going backwards that would necessitate a cut. We just don't have the growth we've had. Now, we may move some things around, and to hold MAEP harmless. And again, going forward, you have to look at just if we're flat, 2% set-asides, we don't want to dip into the rainy day fund anymore. It's just everything looks flat right now. And, that's just, now, let me go one step further on the budget recommendations. We always have the Legislative Budget Office look into things like vacant positions. It's a standard procedure in that process to eliminate positions that have been vacant, say for 3 months, 4 months, something like that. So we'll get those recommendations back from the LBO, and we'll put those as a cut initially in the budget process.
What are your hopes for this session as it relates to Edbuild bringing forth their recommendations for the MAEP funding formula?
Well, the things I like hearing from Edbuild is, the first thing is that we have to satisfy is equity. And when we say equity, that's equitable distribution of education dollars all across the state. And, we do have rich districts, we have poor districts. And in my opinion, you can just, I have some of the poor districts in my Senate district. One of the poor ones, in fact, right next to my hometown, just doesn't have the tax base. Now, they do a great job, but they just don't have the dollars. And I think in hearing some of the presentations from Edbuild, that's one of their main focuses is equity. Now, they take a different approach from MAEP. They are more a per student, and I think they start maybe with a lower base cost, and then it's add back to the student if you have, again, poverty, a low tax-based district, special needs students. They build back, I think, on the per student with those type things that then goes back to the school district. Instead of, we had the free lunch thing. Well, when everybody gets free lunch now. There's no criteria, and you can't even audit the number. The state auditor could not audit the number. You know, that seemed, well, what are we doing here? You know, that just didn't make sense. But again, I like hearing that from Edbuild, that equity is where it's got to start, because especially from Jackson's standpoint, and an appropriator. You know, I hear the lieutenant governor say it often. Why should kids from different zip codes get funded so much differently? And I think that's what you have right now. And there's nothing wrong with wealthy districts who are, the taxpayers are willing to put the money, pony up locally and support their schools. And you know, it's just a tough formula to crack, to get that all around the state.
We've heard a lot of criticism over the years about the current funding formula not being fully funded by the legislature, but only twice. If Edbuild comes back with a new formula that everyone can agree to, it is approved, then do you anticipate there being momentum to fully fund that new formula?
I really do. I really do. I think there'll be a lot of buy-in, and with what we're doing here, and like you say, not everybody's going to agree on anything, but yeah, there'll be a great effort to fund whatever formula that they bring to us. They will have a part in driving and putting together, but yeah, there'll be a great effort to fully fund that.
So when you say that, when you're looking at the budget for next year and you're thinking that MAEP will be held harmless, then how does that idea or the blank space on the line on the page for MAEP match up with fully funding it? Can all of this be accomplished?
Well, any part can be accomplished. You start with a pie. And if you take your pie and you cut your priorities out of what's going to be funded at X level, and then which is sort of what we had to do this past year. We funded priorities when we had fewer resources. You funded priorities at a level that you could stand, like holding MAEP harmless this past year. Then you just have to see what shakes out with the revenue you've got. And that's why you heard of agencies that were cut. Now, you know, then you try to dive in deeper, similar to what we're doing with our working groups. Well, what agencies have some little extra, maybe they could cut some travel and still fulfill their agency's mission. And that's what you've got to do. That's how you put the budget together. That's how businesses fund things. What are our priorities, and where are we going to have to take cuts?
I'd like to switch gears right now. Just wanted to know, right off the top of your head, if there's any other pressing issues beside the budget and education funding that the lawmakers will face during the next session.
Of course, in my office, that's the main thing. You know, we spend the money over here and they raise the money over on this side, is what we like to say, finance and appropriations. No, obviously, one of the other issues is our infrastructure. Highways and bridges, and you know, to me, that's really two different things also. I always view the bridges are a long-term infrastructure problem, and you know, highways, it's when you're building new highways, obviously, but the ongoing maintenance is more recurring problem, a recurring revenue type problem. I know there's some bridge maintenance, but again, getting the initial, I guess, expenditure to get the bridges up to code is like a one-time payment. And I personally am going to look deeper into that, separating the two, and to see if there's other ways to go about that. There's obviously people wanting to raise the gas tax. And I'm, you know, that's being kicked around.
Is
again,
that doable, do you think? No?
Not right now, I don't
Not
think
right
so. I don't, I hear from both sides. I hear from both sides. Some people, well, we've got to we've got to have a different source of revenue. That's generally what you hear.
Sure.
We need a different source of revenue to fund fixing these highways up. And then again, there's people that want to look at MDOT, and maybe this is similar. They were part of the budget working groups that they came before us every time. And a lot of people want to look at maybe their priorities at spending. Right now, are you attacking these deficient bridges and deficient roads with what you have? What is your plan if there was new source of revenue? I think a lot of legislators want to hear that, and again, they're working hard every day. MDOT is, but we want to hear a long range plan. If it didn't include a new source of revenue, but what can we do with what we've got?
Finally, before I let you go here, and I know this has taken much longer than 5 minutes that I promised.
Oh, that's great.
But in my reporting for MPB and this television show At Issue, I have discovered that police officers in Mississippi are not writing tickets for texting and driving. They were basically saying that it's a law that doesn't have a lot of teeth. The burden of proof is too high on them. It really doesn't accomplish what it's set out to do. I talked to one other senator who, on the Democratic side, who said that this is an issue that he's going to bring up again during the session to revisit the texting and driving situation, the law, to see where it can be strengthened. Would you support that?
If we have something on the books that isn't working, we definitely need to look at it. And I don't know what new teeth he's talking about putting into it, but I know there's still a problem with people texting and driving, because when you realize that when you get behind someone that's looking at their phone, they're in the left lane and they're all of a sudden going 40 and they're riding down the road looking at their phone, or that's a problem.
Does it concern you that officers are just simply not writing tickets for this?
Well, sure. Yeah. Again, if it's a law on the books, it's a statute, and we're not enforcing it, there must be a problem. And I'm sure we'll hear from the policemen and the local guys and Highway Patrol. We talk Department of Public Safety, all the time, and they'll be pretty frank, and they're usually they'll come up with some ideas for putting more teeth in it, or what works with them, because we want to support our law enforcement with what'll work.
Buck, thank you very much for joining us today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.